Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today's episode is the quilting episode. Every month I try to share with you a new quilting tutorial and the pattern as well. For this episode, I'm going to share with you this lovely quilt behind me that features 4-point stars. So the finished measurement of this quilt is gonna be about 46.5 inch by 69.5 inch. Obviously you can enlarge the size of this quilt by adding borders. The layout pattern of this quilt is available on PDF format that you can download for free. I will have that link in the description box down below. As complex as this quilt look, we're going to actually just work with one kind of block. The size of each block is 12 inches squares and you're gonna need 24 blocks to make this quilt. The block itself is actually pretty simple. The thing that's gonna make it probably a little tedious is the half rectangle triangle. If you never worked with one before, you may gonna find it a little confusing, but once you get a hang of it, it's actually pretty easy to make. So I suggest maybe you do a little bit of trial before you cut all of your pieces and see if you can like working with it. So the main color that I chose for this quilt is obviously blue, and for the star itself the fabric was kind of ombre, so if you actually see the whole finished quilt, the color is kind of like a little different shade, and I think it looks pretty neat. Obviously guys, you don't have to choose the color blue as your main quilt fabric. You can experiment with different color palette as well. So we're gonna get started soon. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and your quilt turned out great, and as always, if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask me in the comment down below. And without further ado, let's get started. So here's the block that we're going to be working with. So you will need 5 different fabrics for this quilt. I recommend not to use any fabric that has directional print for this project because we're going to rotate the block as we lay them out later. And as you can see here, I have named each fabric alphabetically, so you can either screenshot this, or if you have downloaded the PDF pattern, it should be there as well. From fabric A and B, we're going to cut rectangles measuring 6 3/4 by 4 3/4 inch, and you're gonna need 24 of each. Fold your fabric twice widthwise, just like so, and then you're going to measure 4 3/4 inch and cut. Then you want to open up your strip just like so, and then you're going to trim off the selvage end. Measure in 6 3/4 inch and cut. To save some time, you can also stack up multiple strips and cut it at the same time, and you're gonna keep cutting until you got 24 pieces of rectangles. From the fabric C, you will need to cut 24 pieces of 6 1/4 inch squares. So I did the same like before, folding my fabric twice widthwise and then measure in 6 1/4 inch and cut a strip. And then I'm going to continue on and cut 3 more strips. Open the strip and stack them together, and then from this you're going to measure 6 1/4 inch and cut, and then continue on until you've got 24 pieces of 6 1/4 inch squares. From the fabric D, you're going to need to cut 24 pieces of 4 1/4 inch squares. So first you're going to need to extract 3 strips measuring 4 1/4 inch, and then go ahead and open up your strips and cut 4 1/4 inch squares out of those. Now we're going to work with the fabric E. So first you're going to need to cut 2.5 inches strips, and you will need to cut around 15 strips out of this. From there you're going to need to cut 48 pieces of 6 1/4 inch by 2.5 inch strips, 48 pieces of 4 1/4 by 2.5 inch strips, and 24 pieces of 2.5 inch squares. So here I've got all of my fabrics cut accordingly. Now we're going to work on the half triangle rectangle. So you're going to take one fabric A and one fabric B and then lay them right side together just like so. You want to have the fabric A underneath and the fabric B on top. Then you're going to rotate fabric B towards the left, just like so, and lay that on diagonal angle with the fabric A. And you want to make sure that both of these diagonal corners are aligned. Then you're going to take your ruler and fabric marker and go ahead and draw a line on that diagonal angle. Then you want to place a couple of pins on both sides, and then you're going to sew two seams from a 1/4 inch of the mark center line. If you're using the 1/4 inch foot, you're going to line up the line with your inner edge of the presser foot, just like so. Once you've done sewing, go ahead and remove the pins. My mark has been disappeared really quickly here, but what you're gonna do next, simply line up your ruler on your center mark line again, and then cut with your rotary cutter. Now you've got two half rectangle triangle. Now you want to continue on doing the same until you've got 24 pieces of this. And this half rectangle triangle is going to be the one positioned at the lower bottom left of the block. And then you're going to divide this into two. So we're going to press the seams of half of these towards the fabric A and the other halves towards the fabric B. Here I've got half of my half rectangle triangles already pressed, and these pieces here have been pressed towards fabric B. Now I'm going to press the other halves towards fabric A. Once you've done pressing your half rectangle triangles, we're going to square these pieces to measure 6/4 by 4¼ inch. So take your square ruler, I'm using Omni Grid here, and I'm gonna find the 6¼ inch point, which is right here, and then I'm gonna find the 4¼ inch point, which is right there. Trim the excess fabric at the corners. Then you want to line up your half rectangle triangle with your ruler right on the 6¼ inch by 4¼ inch point, just like I'm showing you here. Then go ahead and trim off the excess fabric. You should have very little excess fabric, probably just about 1/8 inch. Then you want to flip your half rectangle triangle to the opposite side, just like so, and then line up your ruler again and see if there is any excess fabric. So I do have a little bit of excess fabric there, very little, so I'm just gonna go ahead and trim that off. And once you've done that, you should end up with a half rectangle triangle exactly measuring 6¼ inch by 4¼ inch. Alternatively, you can also simply trim off all the edges, I think very little, about 1/8 inch or 1/16 inch, until you get to the measurement of 6¼ inch by 4¼ inch. But you just want to be careful with this method not to cut so much on one side that causing your triangle point to be offsetting. Alright, so here I've got all of my half rectangle triangle for the bottom part of the block already square, and I actually labeled them according to the direction of the pressing. So these pieces here are pressed towards fabric B and these are pressed towards fabric A. As I mentioned earlier, this batch of half rectangle triangle is going to sit on the bottom part of the block. So here I'm going to show you an example of the block that I've done. So these pieces are going to sit right here, the bottom side. Next, we're going to work on the second batch of the half rectangle triangles. These are going to sit on the upper side of the block. So you want to take fabric B and lay that on top of the fabric A, right side together, just like so. Then you're going to rotate fabric B towards your right hand, just like so. Previously we rotate the fabric B towards the left, so this time we're going to do the opposite. Again, you want to make sure that the diagonal corners are aligned. Again, you're going to draw a line on that diagonal angle. And the same way as we did before, we're going to sew two seams a 1/4 inch away from the center mark line. And once you've done that, you want to go ahead and remove the pins and then cut this piece right on the center mark line, and you're going to end up with two half rectangle triangles. So you want to go ahead and make 24 pieces of these. And the same way as we did before, we're going to divide these into two batches. So we're going to press 12 pieces towards fabric B and then another 12 pieces towards fabric A. And once you've done that, go ahead and square them up to get the measurement of 6/4 inch by 4/4 inch. So here I've already got all of my half rectangle triangles for the top part of the block already squared, and again I'll label them according to the pressing direction. Now we're going to start piecing the block, so go ahead and lay your pieces just like what I'm showing you here. So on each layout of your block, you wanna choose half rectangle triangles that are seams are pressed towards the same direction. For example, this one is pressed towards fabric A, so the other one here should be also pressed towards fabric A, and vice versa. If your upper half rectangle triangle seams are pressed towards fabric B, you're going to have the bottom one pressed towards fabric B as well. Now we're going to start sewing the first row. Now we're going to press this the same direction as your half rectangle triangle. So if you see this, it's pressed towards fabric A, which is going to the left side. So you're going to press these seams towards the same direction. So you're gonna end up with something like this. So as you can see, the seams are going towards the same direction. Now we're going to work on the second row. You want to press your second row towards the opposite direction from your first row. So in this case, I'm going to press this second row towards the right. Then we're going to sew the third row. And you're going to press this towards the same direction as your half rectangle triangle as well. Now we're going to sew the first and the second row together. And if you have followed the pressing direction as instructed, your seams should nestle just like so. Now go ahead and pin them in place and then sew with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. Then you want to press this towards the same direction as the seams of your half rectangle triangle. And this is how your seams gonna look like. Next we're going to sew the third row. Again, you're going to nest the seams and place a couple of pins. Again, you want to press this towards the same direction as your half rectangle triangles. And voila, our first block is done, and this should measure 12 inches squares. And then you want to go ahead and make 24 pieces of these blocks and just have fun. So here I've got all 24 blocks already sewn and pressed, and I divided them into two groups according to the pressing direction. So for example, this block here, as you can see, the seams are pressed towards the same direction as the half rectangle triangle, which is the fabric A, and this one also pressed towards the same direction as the half rectangle triangle, which is the fabric B. So you see the seams are following the same direction. So we do this so later on when we're gonna lay out our block together, if you alternate each block according to the direction of the pressing, and then when you sew them together, the seams are gonna nest it and easier to line up. Alright, now we're going to lay our blocks according to the pattern. So go ahead and do as shown here, and you're going to alternate the block based on the direction of the seams. Here I've got my blocks already laid out, so you're gonna end up with 6 rows of block, and each row has 4 blocks, and we're going to piece this one row at the time. Now I'm going to group the blocks from each row. Then you're going to label each row numerically, and you want to make sure that you're not going to mess up with the direction of the block. So you want to keep them the way it was laid out earlier. So for example, if you mistakenly rotate your block to the different direction, that's going to mess up your seam direction and ruin the whole row. We're going to start piecing the first row, so I'm going to take the first block and the second block and then lay them right side together, line up the seams, pin them in place, and then go ahead and sew with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. Alright guys, so here I've got all of my rows already sewn. Now we're going to sew the first row and the second row together, and then the third and the fourth rows together, and then the fifth and the sixth rows together. We're gonna start off from the first and the second row, so lay your fabric right side together just like so. Line up the seams, and then you're going to pin them in place, and then go ahead and sew with 1/4 inch of seam allowance. And obviously, once you've done sewing this, you're going to press the seams towards any direction, or you can also press the seams open if you want your seams to lay more flat. Once you've got your quilt top sewn together, we're going to sandwich this with the quilt backing and the quilt batting. And once you've done that, you want to go ahead and baste this. So I'm going to baste my quilt as usual with basting spray. You can also use pin basting if that's what you prefer, or combine the two. Or you can also use fusible batting instead. First, I'm going to move my quilt top and quilt batting halfway. And then I'm gonna spray my spray basting on the quilt backing. And then I'm gonna take my quilt batting back and lay that on top of my quilt backing again and smooth everything out. And then I'm gonna iron this on low setting, then spray baste the quilt batting. Then I'm gonna take my quilt top and lay that back on top of the batting, smooth everything out and iron it as well. Alright, so half of my quilt has been basted. Now I'm gonna work on the other half, so I'm just gonna rotate this and do the same. Alright, so now that you've done piecing and layering your quilt, go ahead and quilt this. You can do machine quilting, you can do with walking foot or free motion, or you can also do hand quilting. So whichever design that you like. I did mine with free motion quilting, and I combined meandering loops, also stippling on the other section, and I also did U-shape stippling as well. So my sewing machine here is rather very standard home sewing machine, but somehow I made it work to do free motion quilting. Although the designs that I can do with this machine is rather limited, but it's good enough for me because this is gonna be my personal quilt. It's not something that I'm gonna take for a quilt show or something. So if you have kind of standard sewing machine, don't be afraid to quilt your own quilt, be it with walking foot or like what I do here with free motion. And if you're in doubt, you can simply do quilting in the ditch or wavy line quilting. Whatever it is, as long as you finish the quilt, that's all that matters. So once you're done quilting, of course the last step will be to bind your quilt. If you're making your own binding quilt, you will need 7 strips for this project, and that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and please consider subscribing by clicking to the red button down below, and I shall see you next time with another fun sewing and quilting project. Goodbye!